The CEO kissed her in the storm, and everything they'd been hiding was about to explode. Petrina Miller cleaned floors. Choi Tae-yoon ran $1 billion bank. She was invisible. He was untouchable. They had no business even knowing each other's names. But at 3 a.m., when the building emptied and the rules got blurry, that's when it started. An elevator. A conversation. Coffee that tasted like garbage but felt like everything. He looked at her like she mattered. She made him smile like he was human, not just a title. Then the touches started. The secrets. The stolen moments in empty offices where one security camera could ruin them both. "We have to stop," he said after they almost got caught. They didn't stop. So she called him that rainy night and said the words that changed everything. "I'm wet because of you. Please come home tonight." He showed up. Drenched. Desperate. Done pretending. "Before we start, quick one. If you love intense romance, forbidden workplace attraction, and Afro-Korean AMBW love stories, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join our family of listeners." Tonight's story follows Petrina, a black night cleaner, and Choi Tae-yoon, the powerful CEO. You missed a spot. Petrina froze mid-swipe, her mop leaving a wet arc across the marble floor. The voice came from behind her, low, polite, but unmistakably there. She pulled one earbud out and turned slowly. He stood near the elevator bank, briefcase in hand, tie loosened just enough to suggest the late hour. Choi Tae-yoon. The CEO. She'd seen him before, of course. Glimpses in hallways, his back disappearing into conference rooms, his name on the building directory in crisp Hangul and English. But never this close. Never speaking directly to her. "Sir." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He gestured toward a section of floor near the reception desk. "There. You missed it." Petrina followed his gaze and saw nothing. The marble gleamed under the recessed lighting, flawless as a mirror. She looked back at him, searching his face for a hint of mockery, but found only exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His shoulders carried tension that no expensive suit could hide. "I don't see anything," she said carefully. "Exactly." He shifted his briefcase to his other hand. "You're very thorough. I've noticed." Heat crawled up her neck. She tightened her grip on the mop handle. "I just do my job." At 2 a.m. He glanced at his watch. "Every night this week. Night shift pays better." The words came out sharper than she intended. She softened her tone. "And it's quieter. I like quiet." He nodded slowly, as if filing this information away. "I apologize for startling you. I thought you heard the elevator." "Headphones." She held up the earbud, still dangling from her ear. "Helps pass the time." "What are you listening to?" The question caught her off guard. She hesitated, then decided honesty was simpler than evasion. "Podcast. About the Joseon dynasty. I'm trying to learn more about Korean history." Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or interest. He adjusted his grip on his briefcase, but didn't move toward the elevator. "Which podcast?" "The one by Professor Kim at Yonsei. The English version." She felt suddenly self-conscious. "I'm sure my pronunciation is terrible. I'm still learning Hangul." "How long have you been in Seoul?" 8 months. "And you chose to learn about Joseon?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Most expatriates start with K-pop and beauty products." "I'm not most expatriates." The words came out before she could stop them. She backtracked quickly. "I mean, I like understanding where I am. The history matters." He studied her for a moment longer than comfortable. Petrina felt exposed under his gaze, aware of her worn cleaning uniform, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, the chemical smell of floor cleaner clinging to her gloves. She existed in his world only as part of the invisible infrastructure, someone who made things clean and disappeared before morning. "I should let you work," he said finally. "Good night, Miss Miller." Petrina Miller. Miss Miller. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that felt both formal and strangely intimate. "Have a good night." He walked to the elevator and pressed the button. Petrina returned to her mopping, hyper-aware of his presence even with her back turned. The elevator chimed. Doors opened. She heard his footsteps, then silence. When she glanced over her shoulder, He was gone. She stood there for a full minute, mop dripping onto the floor, creating the very mess she was supposed to prevent. 3 nights later, she found him asleep in his office. Petrina had master keys for every floor, a necessity for after-hours cleaning. She always knocked before entering executive offices, waited 10 seconds, then entered with her supply cart. The routine had become muscle memory. Knock, wait, enter, clean, exit. Simple. Professional. Safe. But when she opened the door to the CEO's office, she found Choi Tae-yoon slumped over his desk, face turned toward the window, shoulders rising and falling with the slow rhythm of deep sleep. Papers surrounded him, financial reports, contracts, documents covered in dense Korean text. A cold cup of coffee sat near his elbow, a skin of milk fat congealing on its surface. Petrina stood in the doorway, hand still on the cart handle. She should leave. Come back later. Let him sleep. But the office needed cleaning. And he looked so utterly exhausted that waking him felt cruel. She made a decision. Moving with exaggerated care, she eased her cart inside and began working as silently as possible. She emptied the trash can near the door first, the easiest task, the quietest. Then she wiped down the small conference table in the corner, each movement deliberate and slow. The windows came next. She used a microfiber cloth instead of spray, reducing noise to almost nothing. She was halfway through dusting the bookshelves when he stirred. What time is it? His voice was rough with sleep, disoriented. Petrina turned slowly, cloth still in hand. 3:15, sir. He blinked several times, processing her presence. Then his gaze sharpened. Miss Miller. I tried not to wake you. She gestured apologetically at her cart. I can come back later if... No. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. The gesture disheveled his usually perfect appearance, made him look younger. More human. No, it's fine. I didn't mean to fall asleep. You looked like you needed it. The words slipped out before she could censor them. Too familiar. Too presumptuous. She tensed, waiting for the subtle rebuke that powerful men deployed with such practiced ease. Instead, he laughed, a short, tired sound that held more exhaustion than humor. I suppose I did. He glanced at the papers surrounding him. Board meeting in 5 hours. I'm not ready. Petrina resumed dusting, giving him privacy to compose himself. I'll work quickly. You won't know I'm here. You're very good at that. At what? Being invisible. He said it without cruelty, as simple observation. I've watched you work. You move through this building like a ghost. People walk right past you without seeing you. That's the point. She moved to the next shelf. Nobody wants to notice the cleaning staff. We're supposed to make everything perfect and disappear. Does that bother you? The question surprised her into honesty. Sometimes. Other times it's a relief. A relief. She chose her words carefully. When you look like me in a place like this, invisibility can be protection. Silence filled the space between them. When she glanced back, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't read, not pity, not curiosity, something else entirely. You're not invisible to me, he said quietly. The cloth slipped from her fingers. She caught it before it hit the floor, her heart suddenly loud in her ears. I should finish the windows. Petrina. Her name and his voice stopped her completely. He'd used her first name without the formal miss, without the professional distance. It felt like a door opening, one she wasn't sure either of them should walk through. Yes. Thank you. For letting me sleep. You could have woken me immediately. You're welcome. She kept her voice neutral, professional. I'll be out of your way in 10 minutes. She finished quickly, efficiently, and left without another word. But as she pushed her cart down the hallway, she felt his gaze following her until the office door closed. The elevator incident happened on a Thursday. Petrina was hauling her supply cart onto the executive floor elevator when the doors started closing. She lunged forward, catching them with her shoulder, and stumbled inside with less grace than dignity. The cart wheels caught on the threshold. She was bent over, wrestling with the stubborn wheel, when she realized she wasn't alone. Choi Tae-yoon stood in the corner, hand still raised from where he'd hit the door-open button. Thank you, she gasped, finally wrenching the card inside. The doors closed. Sorry, I thought it was empty. It's fine. But his voice was tight, strained. She looked at him properly then and saw the tension in his jaw, the rigid set of his shoulders. His knuckles were white where they gripped his briefcase handle. Are you okay? Yes. The word came too quickly. The elevator began its descent. Petrina watched the numbers decrease, 23, 22, 21. Tae-yoon's breathing had turned shallow, almost imperceptible. He'd positioned himself as far from the doors as physically possible. Understanding dawned slowly. You don't like elevators. He didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Petrina made a split-second decision. She started humming low, rhythmic, a song her grandmother used to sing. Then she began talking, keeping her voice steady and conversational. Did you know that in Joseon Dynasty, they had a saying about patience? Even the stone bridge must be tapped before crossing. Professor Kim explained it means you should test even things that seem solid. Be cautious even when you think you're safe. 18. 17. 16. I think about that a lot, she continued. How nothing is ever as stable as it looks. How we're all just testing stones, hoping they hold. His breathing had evened slightly. She kept going. My grandmother used to say something similar. Don't trust any floor you haven't swept yourself. She was a housekeeper in Virginia for 40 years. She taught me that real knowledge comes from getting close to things, touching them, understanding them from the ground up. 12. 11. 10. I miss her. She died before I came to Seoul. She would have loved it here, all the history, the food, the way people respect their elders. She would have fit right in. The elevator chimed. Ground floor. The doors opened onto the marble lobby, empty and echoing at 3 in the morning. Petrina pulled her cart forward but paused in the doorway. She turned back to look at him. Tae-yoon stood exactly where he'd been, but his shoulders had dropped slightly. His breathing was normal. He met her eyes. Thank you, he said. For what? I was just rambling. For not making it a thing. His voice was quiet, genuine. For not asking questions or offering advice. Everyone's afraid of something. She shrugged. Being trapped in a small metal box suspended by cables seems pretty reasonable to me. The corners of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Have a good night, Petrina. He dropped the miss again. She noticed, but didn't comment. You too, Mr. Choi. Tae-yoon. The correction was gentle. When it's just us, you can call me Tae-yoon. The elevator doors began to close. She watched him through the narrowing gap until he disappeared from view. After that night, they developed a pattern. Not deliberate at first, just coincidence stacked on coincidence until it became something else entirely. He stayed late more often. She timed her cleaning route to reach the executive floor around 3. They'd exchange a few words, about work, about Seoul, about nothing important. He'd ask about her podcast. She'd ask about his board meetings. Conversations that felt both safe and dangerous, innocent yet charged with something neither acknowledged. One night, she found him making coffee in the executive break room. The sight was so unexpected that she laughed before she could stop herself. Something funny? He asked, measuring grounds into the filter. I just never pictured the CEO making his own coffee at 3 in the morning. I'm very self-sufficient. He pressed the brew button with exaggerated dignity. I can also microwave instant noodles and order delivery. Impressive skills. I know. My mother is very disappointed. He said it lightly, but something tightened in his voice. She thinks I should have staff for everything. Live up to the position. Petrina leaned against the doorframe, sensing an opening. What do you think? I think positions are prisons sometimes. He watched the coffee drip into the pot, his profile sharp in the fluorescent light. People see the title and think they know everything about you. What you want. What you should want. Who you're supposed to be. I know that feeling. He turned to look at her. Do you? Every time someone looks at me and makes assumptions about where I'm from, what I do, why I'm here, what I can or can't do. She held his gaze. Every time invisibility isn't a choice, but an expectation. The coffee maker gurgled its final breath. Neither of them moved. Do you want a cup? He asked. I'm working. One cup won't hurt. He pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. Consider it a break. She should say no. Maintain professional distance. Remember the power dynamic, the optics, the 100 reasons this was a terrible idea. Okay, she heard herself say. 1 cup. They sat at the small break room table, him with his expensive suit and tired eyes, her with her cleaning uniform and chemical-scented gloves removed and tucked in her pocket. The coffee was terrible, burnt and bitter, but neither complained. Why Seoul? He asked. Of all the places you could have gone. I wanted somewhere completely different. She wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. Somewhere that would force me to rebuild everything. Learn new rules. Start over. Running from something? Running toward something. There's a difference. She sipped the awful coffee. What about you? Did you always want this? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. No, he said finally. I wanted to teach. Literature. I wanted to spend my life reading and thinking and helping students discover ideas that would change them. He smiled, but it was sad. Instead, I read financial reports and think about quarterly earnings and help shareholders make more money. It's not too late, isn't it? He looked at her directly. I'm 34. I've spent 12 years building this career. My family depends on my success. The company employs 3,000 people. I can't just walk away because I had different dreams when I was 22. No, Petrina agreed. But you could make different choices going forward. Small ones. Ones that bring you closer to who you actually want to be. Like making my own coffee at 3 in the morning? It's a start. He laughed then, genuine and surprised. The sound transformed his face, erased years of carefully maintained control. For a moment, he looked exactly like someone who would have chosen literature over banking. You're dangerous, Petrina Miller. How so? You make me think things might be possible. He stood, collecting both mugs. That's the most dangerous thing of all. She left shortly after, but his words stayed with her through the rest of her shift, through her subway ride home, through the hours she should have been sleeping. She replayed the conversation obsessively, analyzing every pause, every inflection. Somewhere in the gray space between professionalism and something else entirely, they'd crossed a line. Neither of them had acknowledged it. But they both knew. The following week, management implemented a new security protocol. All cleaning staff had to check in with the overnight security guard every 2 hours. The change was minor, administrative, but it disrupted Petrina's carefully timed route. She could no longer guarantee reaching the executive floor at 3. She told herself it didn't matter. That she cleaned offices, not kept appointments. That whatever had developed between her and Tae-yoon was inappropriate and couldn't continue anyway. But on Tuesday night, when she finally made it to the executive floor at 4:15, she found a note on her supply cart. The handwriting was precise, controlled. I missed our coffee. No signature. No name. But she knew. She tucked the note into her pocket and smiled despite herself, despite all the reasons she shouldn't. On Friday, she timed her security check perfectly and reached the executive floor at 3. The break room was empty. She felt disappointment so sharp it surprised her with its intensity. Then she saw the light under his office door. She knocked. Waited. Heard his voice. Come in. He sat at his desk, but the papers were pushed aside. 2 mugs of coffee waited on the cleared surface. He'd been expecting her. I adjusted my schedule, he said simply, to match the new security protocols. Petrina closed the door behind her. That seems excessive for terrible coffee. Maybe I like terrible coffee. Or maybe like the company. The words hung between them, honest and dangerous. Neither moved. Yes, he said finally. Maybe I do. She crossed the office and sat in the chair opposite his desk. He pushed 1 mug toward her. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, brief and electric. They talked for 30 minutes, and it felt like both forever and not nearly long enough. When she finally left to finish her shift, she carried his words with her like a secret. Maybe I like the company. It was the closest either of them had come to acknowledging what was building between them. A confession disguised as casual conversation. An admission that couldn't be taken back. Petrina lay in her small apartment as dawn broke over Seoul and wondered what happened next. Where they went from here. Whether the thing growing between them could survive the harsh light of reality. She didn't have answers. But for the first time in years, she wanted to find out. The supply room incident was entirely accidental and completely mortifying. Petrina had ducked inside to refill her cart with paper towels and cleaning solution. The room was cramped, shelves stacked high with supplies for the entire building. She was reaching for a box on the top shelf when the door opened behind her. Sorry, I didn't know anyone was. She turned too quickly. Her elbow caught the box. It tipped, spilling rolls of paper towels everywhere. She stumbled backward to avoid the cascade, lost her balance, and would have fallen if strong hands hadn't caught her shoulders. Tae-yoon steadied her, his face inches from hers. They froze in that position, her off balance, him holding her, paper towels bouncing off shelves around them in a ridiculous chorus of soft thumps. Are you hurt? His voice was low, concerned. Just my dignity. She found her footing, but he didn't release her immediately. His hands lingered on her shoulders, warm through her uniform. What are you doing in the supply room? Looking for printer paper. My assistant usually handles this, but it's 4 in the morning and I'm out. He glanced around at the chaos. I seem to have created a disaster. We both did. She bent to collect the scattered paper towels, needing the activity to mask the way her heart was racing. He crouched beside her, gathering rolls. They worked in silence, passing items back and forth, rebuilding the fallen tower of supplies. In the cramped space, their movements were a careful dance, avoid touching, maintain space, pretend the proximity wasn't affecting them both. There, Petrina said when the last roll was stacked. She stood, but misjudged the clearance. Her head cracked against the metal shelf. Damn. She pressed her palm to her scalp, eyes watering from the sharp pain. Let me see. Tae-yoon was beside her immediately, his fingers gentle as they moved her hand away. You're bleeding a little. Not much, but we should clean it. I'm fine. You're not fine. Come on. He guided her out of the supply room and down the hall to the executive bathroom. The gesture was so natural, so instinctive, that she didn't think to resist. The bathroom was absurdly luxurious, marble counters, motion sensor faucets, the faint scent of expensive soap. Tae-yoon wet paper towels at the sink, while Petrina perched on the edge of the counter. Lean your head back. She obeyed. He stepped close, one hand supporting the back of her head while the other dabbed carefully at the small cut. His touch was clinical but tender, each movement precise. You're good at this, she murmured. I have a younger sister. She was accident-prone growing up. His thumb brushed her hairline, checking for other injuries. This might sting. He applied pressure to stop the minimal bleeding. Petrina focused on breathing evenly, hyper-aware of how close he was, how his other hand still cradled her head, how his cologne mixed with the scent of soap and coffee. Why are you really here? The question escaped before she could stop it. At 4 in the morning, personally getting printer paper. You could have waited. Had someone else do it. His hand stilled. I wanted to see you. The confession was so quiet she almost missed it. Tae-yoon. I know. He pulled back slightly, but didn't release her. I know all the reasons this is complicated. The position difference, the power dynamic, the optics. I've listed them in my head 100 times. And I still wanted to see you. His eyes searched hers. I've been making excuses to work late. Timing my schedule around your shift. Finding reasons to be on floors I never visit. I'm acting like a teenager with a crush and I should stop, but I can't seem to. Petrina's breath caught. You think I don't know? I've been doing the same thing. Trading shifts, taking the longest routes, checking if your office light is on before I even reach the executive floor. She laughed, but it came out shaky. We're both pathetic. Probably. His thumb traced a gentle line along her jaw. What do we do about it? I don't know. Honesty felt like the only option. You're the CEO. I'm cleaning staff. Even if we wanted to try something, the company would never allow it. They'd fire me before approving it. I could protect you from that. Could you? She held his gaze. Or would you just make both our lives harder? Give people ammunition to question my competence, your judgment, our motives? He dropped his hand, stepping back. The loss of contact felt physical. You're right. You're absolutely right. That doesn't make it easier. No. He tossed the bloody paper towels into the trash. It doesn't. They stood in the luxurious bathroom, the fluorescent lights harsh and unforgiving, the reality of their situation settling between them like a wall. I should get back to work, Petrina said finally. Yes, but neither moved. Tae-yoon, don't. He held up a hand. Please don't say it. Because if you do, if you admit out loud what I see in your eyes, I won't be able to do the responsible thing. I won't be able to walk away. Petrina slid off the counter, standing close enough to touch but not touching. Then I won't say it. Thank you. She left him in the bathroom, but the ghost of his touch lingered on her skin for the rest of her shift. They avoided each other for 3 days. Petrina rearranged her schedule, deliberately timing her routes to miss him. It was cowardice and she knew it, but the alternative, facing him, maintaining polite distance, pretending the bathroom hadn't happened, felt impossible. On the 4th day, she found another note on her cart. I'm sorry. Can we talk? She crumpled it in her fist, then immediately smoothed it out again, handling it like something precious. Because despite everything, despite all sense, it was. That night, she knocked on his office at 3. Come in. He sat at his desk, but the exhaustion on his face had deepened. He looked like he hadn't slept since their last conversation. You wanted to talk, she said, staying near the door. I owe you an apology. He stood, came around the desk, but maintained distance. What I said in the bathroom, the way I acted, it was inappropriate. I put you in an uncomfortable position. You didn't. I did. I'm your employer, technically. Even though we don't work in the same department, even though I don't supervise you directly, there's still a power imbalance. I shouldn't have, he stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I shouldn't have said those things. What if I wanted you to? The questions stopped him cold. Petrina, you think you're the only one with something to lose here? She stepped further into the office, closing the door behind her. I could lose my job, my work visa, my entire life in this country that I've built from nothing. But I'm still here. Still showing up at 3 in the morning hoping you'll be in the break room making terrible coffee. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've been thinking about you every single day since that first night in the elevator. I'm saying that I've memorized your schedule, learned your routines, found excuses to be near you even though I know how dangerous that is. She held his gaze. I'm saying that you're not alone in this. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands framed her face, gentle but urgent. Tell me to stop. I can't. Petrina, if we do this. I know. We have to be careful. Secret. We can't tell anyone, can't let anyone see, can't be careless. Her hands came up to cover his. I know all of that. But I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this. So am I. His forehead touched hers. So am I. They stood like that, breathing the same air, not kissing but closer than they'd ever been. The moment stretched, suspended, perfect in its restraint. Finally, reluctantly, they separated. We need rules, Tae-yoon said, his voice unsteady. Boundaries. Agreed. Petrina moved to the chair opposite his desk, needing the physical distance to think clearly. Nothing at work. Not where anyone could see. No special treatment. No favoritism. We keep our relationship completely separate from the company. No one can know. Not yet. Not until we figure out how to handle this properly. They outlined their parameters like a business negotiation, clinical and practical. But underneath the careful words ran a current of want neither could fully contain. When? Petrina asked finally. If not here, then where? I don't know. He leaned back in his chair, looking more tired than ever. I have a schedule that's managed down to 15-minute increments. Security tracks my movements. People notice if I deviate from routine. And I work nights, sleep days. Our lives barely overlap. We'll figure it out. But he sounded uncertain. Petrina stood. I should go. Finish my shift. Wait. He pulled open a desk drawer, removed a business card, and wrote something on the back. My personal number. Not the office line. She took the card carefully, like it might burn her. I'll text you. Please do. At the door, she paused. Tae-yoon? I don't regret this. Whatever happens, I want you to know that. Neither do I. She left before either of them could say anything more. The texting started tentatively. Good morning messages that acknowledged their opposite schedules. Brief exchanges during her breaks, his meetings. Nothing substantial, just small confirmations that the other person existed, was there. Then, gradually, the messages deepened. Tae-yoon sent her photos from his office window, Seoul at sunset, the city lights spreading like stars. She responded with images from her midnight walks home, empty streets, closed shops, the city's secret nocturnal face. They shared thoughts too personal for their careful break room conversations. He confessed his fear of disappointing his family. She admitted how lonely Seoul felt sometimes, how much she missed her grandmother's voice. He told her about the book he kept in his desk drawer, the novel he'd been writing in stolen moments for 3 years. She sent him photos of her tiny apartment, the plants she'd named after Korean historical figures, her growing collection of language textbooks. Do you ever feel like you're living the wrong life? He texted one afternoon. All the time, she replied. Like I'm reading someone else's script. Maybe we could write new ones. Maybe. 3 weeks into their secret, they finally managed to meet outside the bank. Tae-yoon suggested a bookstore in Insadong, a place he frequented but never at predictable times. Petrina agreed, too eager to see him to question the wisdom of the risk. She arrived first, nervous in civilian clothes, jeans, a simple sweater, her hair down instead of pinned up. She felt exposed without her uniform, visible in ways that terrified her. Then she saw him walking up the street, and her nervousness transformed into something else entirely. He wore casual clothes too, dark jeans, a gray sweater, glasses she'd never seen him in before. He looked younger, less burdened, almost like the literature professor he'd wanted to be. Their eyes met through the bookstore window. She smiled. He smiled back. Inside, surrounded by towers of books and the musty smell of old paper, they browsed separately but stayed aware of each other's location. She ran her fingers along spines of Korean poetry collections she couldn't yet read. He drifted through the history section, occasionally glancing her way. Finally, they met in the back corner, in a section labeled Foreign Literature. Hi, she said, feeling absurdly shy. Hi. He held up a book. Have you read this? It was James Baldwin, a collection of essays she'd read 3 times. Yes, it's one of my favorites. Mine too. He set it down carefully. Strange, finding it here. Why strange? Because you recommended it. In one of your texts. And now here it is, like a sign. I don't believe in signs. Neither do I. He moved closer, just slightly. But I believe in this. Whatever this is. They stayed in the bookstore for 2 hours, talking quietly in the dusty corners, passing books back and forth like secrets. When they finally left, they walked separately to the subway station, maintaining careful distance. But at the platform, waiting for trains going different directions, he caught her eye across the crowd and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. She mouthed back, same. Their trains arrived simultaneously. She watched his car pull away, carrying him back to his controlled, scheduled life. She rode her own train to her small apartment, where she could finally smile without hiding it. That night, her phone buzzed with a message. When can I see you again? She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on honesty. Soon. Too soon. Not soon enough. His reply came immediately. I know exactly what you mean. The near miss happened 2 weeks later, and it was terrifying. They'd grown bolder, or more careless. The line between the two had blurred. Quick meetings in empty office spaces after her shifts. Stolen conversations in stairwells that no one used. Moments of contact that left them both shaking with want and restraint. That night, they were in a conference room on the 15th floor. He'd kissed her for the first time there, gentle and desperate, his hands trembling as they cupped her face. She'd kissed him back with months of denied longing, every careful word and restrained gesture finally released. They were mid-kiss, pressed against the glass wall overlooking the city, when they heard voices in the hallway. They broke apart instantly. Petrina grabbed her cleaning cart while Tae-yoon straightened his tie, both moving with adrenaline-sharpened precision. By the time the security guard opened the door, she was wiping down the conference table and he was standing by the window, phone to his ear, pantomiming a business call. "Evening, Mr. Choi," the guard said. "Just doing rounds." "Of course." Tae-yoon's voice was perfectly steady. "I'm finishing some calls before heading home." The guard glanced at Petrina. She kept her head down, continued cleaning, played her role flawlessly. "Mississippi." The guard nodded at her, then left. They waited in silence for a full minute after the footsteps faded. "That was close," Petrina whispered finally. "Too close." Tae-yoon moved away from her, putting the entire conference table between them. "We can't keep doing this. Not here." "I know. Someone will notice eventually. Someone will see." "I know." She set down her cleaning cloth. "So, what do we do?" He looked at her across the space, the CEO and the cleaning woman, separated by everything society said mattered. "We stop. We have to." The words landed like blows. "Is that what you want?" "No." His voice cracked. "God, no. But what I want isn't the point. We have to be realistic." "Realistic." She laughed, but it was bitter. "That's what you want? To be realistic? What I want is impossible." "Why?" She moved around the table, closing the distance between them. "Why is it impossible? Because I clean floors and you sit in boardrooms? Because people will judge us? Because it's inconvenient? Because I could destroy your life?" His hands fisted at his sides. "One wrong move, one person with a camera, one rumor, and you lose everything. Your job, your visa, your reputation. I have money and power and connections. I'd survive the scandal. You wouldn't." She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, that they could make it work, that love conquered all the bullshit obstacles society erected. But he wasn't wrong. Every word he'd said was true. "So that's it then." She stepped back. "We stop." "Petrina." "No, you're right. You're completely right." She picked up her cart handle. "This was a mistake from the beginning. We both knew it." She left before he could respond, before her voice could betray how close she was to crying. They didn't speak for a week. She adjusted her schedule again, made sure their paths never crossed. He stopped leaving notes. She deleted their text chain 3 times, then restored it from backups twice. On Friday night, rain poured over Seoul with biblical intensity. The kind of storm that flooded streets and stopped trains. Petrina's shift ended at 6 in the morning, but by 4, the building manager announced that all non-essential personnel should leave early due to weather conditions. She gathered her things, changed out of her uniform in the staff room, and headed for the lobby. The rain outside was a solid wall of water. No taxis. No buses. The subway station reported flooding. "Miss Miller." She turned. Tae-yoon stood near the elevators, jacket over his arm, looking as stranded as she felt. "Mr. Choi." They were back to formalities. It hurt more than she'd expected. "Do you need a ride?" he asked carefully. "My driver is picking me up in 10 minutes. "I couldn't. It's a monsoon." He gestured at the windows. "You'll be waiting hours for transportation." She should refuse. Maintain distance. Stick to their decision. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Thank you." They waited in tense silence until the car arrived, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. The driver opened the door. Tae-yoon gestured for her to enter first. She gave her address to the driver, trying not to notice how small the back seat felt, how Tae-yoon's presence filled it completely. They drove through flooded streets, the city transformed into rivers and waterfalls. Neither spoke. The driver kept his eyes on the road. When they reached her building, Petrina thanked the driver and reached for the door handle. Tae-yoon's hand caught her wrist. "Wait." His voice was rough. "Please." She froze, heart hammering. "Tae-yoon, we agreed." "I know what we agreed. I've spent 7 days trying to convince myself it was the right decision." His grip tightened slightly. "I'm failing. We can't do this." "I know." But he didn't release her. "Tell me you haven't been miserable. Tell me the past week hasn't felt like walking through fog. Tell me you don't think about me constantly." She couldn't. Every word he said echoed her own thoughts, her own misery. "It doesn't matter what I feel," she said instead. "The obstacles are still there. Then we find ways around them." "How?" She turned to face him fully. "How do we make this work in any way that doesn't end with one of us destroyed?" "I don't know yet. But I'm tired of accepting that we can't." His thumb traced circles on her inner wrist, the gesture unconscious and intimate. "I've spent my entire life doing what was expected. Following the path laid out for me. Being responsible, practical, safe. And I'm exhausted, Petrina. I'm so tired of living a life I never chose." The driver maintained professional invisibility, eyes forward, giving them privacy in the midst of a storm. "What are you saying?" Petrina asked, even though she knew. "I'm saying I don't want to give this up. Us. Whatever we could be." He met her eyes. "I'm saying that maybe some risks are worth taking." She wanted to believe him. Wanted to ignore every logical reason they should walk away. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her head, years of hard-won wisdom. Wanting something doesn't make it possible. "I need to think," she said finally. "I can't make this decision in a car, in a storm, with a week of missing you clouding my judgment." "Fair enough." He released her wrist, but slowly, reluctantly. "Take time. Think." But Petrina, he waited until she looked at him. "I'm not walking away. Not unless you tell me to." She left the car and ran through the rain to her building entrance. When she looked back, the sedan was still there, headlights cutting through the storm. She couldn't see inside, but she knew he was watching. The car didn't leave until she was safely through the door. Alone in her apartment, soaked and shivering, Petrina called the one person who might understand. "Hey, girl." Her best friend Zara's voice came through clear despite the distance. "You know it's like 10 at night here, right?" "I know. I'm sorry. I need advice." "About what?" Then, more carefully, "Or about who?" Petrina told her everything. The late-night encounters, the growing feelings, the impossible situation. She left nothing out, knowing Zara would see through any omissions anyway. When she finished, silence filled the line. "Say something," Petrina pleaded. "I'm trying to figure out if you're being brave or stupid." Zara's voice held no judgment, just consideration. "Maybe both." "Helpful." "Okay, real talk. You know this is complicated as hell, right? Like, could blow up your whole life complicated." "I know. But you're also the most careful, thoughtful person I know. You wouldn't be considering this unless it felt real. Unless he felt worth it." Petrina closed her eyes. "He does. That's what scares me." "Then here's my question. What scares you more, trying and failing or never trying at all?" She didn't have to think about the answer. Never trying. There you go. She heard Zara moving around, probably making tea the way she always did during serious conversations. "Look, I can't tell you this will work out. Can't promise it won't explode in your face. But I can tell you that you've never sounded like this about anyone. And that has to mean something." They talked for another hour, Zara asking practical questions Petrina hadn't considered. What happens if someone at work finds out? How do you date someone with his schedule? What's the endgame? Does he eventually go public, or do you stay secret forever? Petrina didn't have good answers. But talking it through helped clarify what she did know she wanted to try. Despite the risks, despite the obstacles, despite everything logical screaming at her to walk away, she wanted him. The next morning, technically afternoon by the time she woke, she texted him. "Can we talk? In person?" His response came immediately. "When and where?" She suggested a Pojangmaka near the Han River, far from his usual circles. He agreed without hesitation. She arrived first, sliding onto a plastic stool and ordering soju she didn't intend to drink. The tent was crowded with after-work groups, loud and anonymous, exactly what they needed. Tae-yoon appeared 10 minutes later, slightly breathless like he'd rushed. He changed from a suit into jeans and a jacket, but he still looked unmistakably himself, polished, careful, a man used to control. "Hi," she said when he sat beside her. "Hi." He ordered his own soju, then turned to face her fully. "I've been going insane waiting for your text. I needed time to think clearly." "And did you?" His voice held barely restrained hope. "Think clearly?" "Yes." She took a breath. "I want to try. Whatever this is, Wherever it goes, I want to try. Relief washed over his face so completely that she realized how terrified he'd been that she'd end things. But we need real rules this time, she continued. Not just vague boundaries. Actual plans. Agreed. He pulled out his phone. I've been thinking about this too. Making lists. Of course he had. She loved that about him, the way he approached even impossible situations with organization and planning. They spent the next hour mapping out their relationship like a business strategy. They would date outside the office, never during work hours. They'd maintain complete professionalism at the bank, no special treatment or favoritism. They would tell no one initially, but eventually, if things progressed, he would inform HR and request appropriate departmental transfers to eliminate any power dynamic concerns. What about your family? Petrina asked. When would you tell them? He was quiet. I don't know. They have expectations. About who you should date? About everything. He turned his soju glass in his hands. But my mother especially has opinions about appropriate matches. Someone from the right family, right background, right everything. And I'm none of those things. You're everything that matters. He looked at her directly. But yes, she'll be difficult. I need time to manage that conversation carefully. Petrina understood the translation. His family would disapprove. Possibly reject her entirely. She'd expected it, but hearing it confirmed still stung. I can wait, she said. But Tae-yoon, I need to know you'll eventually stand up to them. I won't be your secret forever. You won't be. I promise. His hand found hers under the tent cover. I just need to do this right. They stayed until the tent closed, then walked along the river as dawn approached. Seoul glittered around them, oblivious to the small revolution taking place in their intertwined fingers. When do I actually get to take you on a date? He asked. A real one, where I pick you up and we go somewhere nice and I try to impress you? She laughed. You're literally the CEO of a major bank. I think I'm already impressed. That's the job. I want to impress you as Tae-yoon. He stopped walking, turned to face her. The guy who makes terrible coffee and gets nervous in elevators and has been half in love with you since you told me about stone bridges. Her breath caught. Half in love. More than half, he admitted quietly. Significantly more. She stretched up on her toes and kissed him, there on the river path as the city woke around them. It was brief, soft, perfect in its simplicity. Significantly more, she whispered against his lips. Same. The next 6 weeks existed in a strange double life. At work, they were strangers. He was the CEO, she was invisible staff. They never spoke, never acknowledged each other, maintained perfect professional distance. Outside work, they built something real. Dates at hole-in-the-wall restaurants where no one knew him. Long walks through neighborhoods far from his usual haunts. Movie theaters in suburbs where businessmen in expensive suits never ventured. They learned each other in stolen hours, building intimacy through conversation and presence more than touch. He told her about the pressure of his position, the weight of family expectations, the loneliness of being the person everyone relied on. She shared her experience of being foreign in Seoul, the microaggressions and stares, the exhaustion of being visible and invisible simultaneously. They discovered shared loves, jazz music, terrible action movies, the specific comfort of instant ramen at 2 in the morning. They argued about literature and politics and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. They built inside jokes and rituals, the small intimacies that transformed strangers into something more. But the secrecy wore on them both. I hate this, Tae-yoon said one night, walking her home after dinner. Hiding you. Pretending we're nothing to each other. I know. You deserve better. You deserve someone who can take you to nice restaurants and introduce you to his friends and not worry about photographers. I knew what I was signing up for. She squeezed his hand. I chose this. You shouldn't have to choose between being with me and being visible. She didn't have a good response. Because he was right, but wanting things to be different didn't make them so. The shift happened on a random Tuesday. Petrina was cleaning the executive floor, headphones in, when she noticed commotion near the conference rooms. Raised voices. The sharp sound of an argument that had escalated beyond professional. She pulled out her earbuds and heard Tae-yoon's voice, controlled but strained, That decision is final. You're making a mistake. Another voice, older, angry. The board will never approve. Then the board can vote me out. Silence. Then footsteps. Someone leaving in obvious fury. A door slammed. Petrina should have walked away. Minded her own business. Maintained her invisibility. Instead, she knocked on his office door. What? The single word was sharp, frustrated. She opened the door carefully. He sat at his desk, head in his hands, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. Tae-yoon. She used his first name without thinking, professional distance abandoned. He looked up, and his expression transformed. Exhaustion became something more complex: relief, pain, need. You shouldn't be here, he said, but made no move to send her away. I heard arguing. She closed the door behind her, breaking another of their carefully constructed rules. Are you okay? No. He laughed bitterly. I'm fighting with the board over ethical practices they don't want to implement because it might reduce profits by a fraction of a percent. I'm barely sleeping. My mother called today to inform me she's arranged a meeting with the daughter of a business associate, someone she deems appropriate. And I can't stop thinking about how much I hate lying. To everyone. About you. About us. The confession spilled out of him, control finally breaking. Petrina crossed to his desk, came around to where he sat. What do you need? She asked simply. You. He looked up at her. Just you. She made a decision. Locked his office door. Closed the blinds. Then she pulled him to his feet and into her arms. They stood like that for a long time, him clinging to her like an anchor, her holding him with fierce protectiveness. No words. Just presence. I want to tell them, he said finally, voice muffled against her shoulder. My family, the board, everyone. I'm tired of hiding. Are you sure? No. He pulled back to look at her. But I'm more sure about you than I've been about anything in years. And that has to count for something. It counts for everything. She touched his face gently. But Tae-yoon, if you do this, there's no taking it back. Your family will be upset. The company will have opinions. People will judge us. Let them. His hands covered hers. I've spent my life worrying about judgment. About meeting expectations. About being who everyone else needs me to be. I'm done. I choose you. I choose us. She wanted to believe him. But she'd also seen how he carried the weight of others' expectations, how deeply embedded his sense of responsibility ran. Talk to your family first, she said. Before making any public announcements, give them a chance to adjust. He nodded slowly. This weekend. I'll tell them this weekend. And I'll be right here when you do. They held each other until her phone alarm reminded her she had 2 more floors to clean. She left reluctantly, checking the hallway before slipping out. But as she pushed her cart away, she felt the shift. Things were changing. They were choosing forward motion over safety. It terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. That Friday, as predicted, Petrina's shift ended, but she couldn't sleep. She lay in her apartment, knowing Tae-yoon was with his family, having the conversation that would determine their future. Her phone stayed silent for hours. She checked it obsessively, imagining worst-case scenarios. Finally, at 8 in the evening, it rang. How did it go? She asked immediately. About as well as expected. His voice was flat, exhausted. My mother cried. My father lectured me about responsibility and family reputation. My sister was the only one who seemed even remotely supportive. I'm so sorry. They'll come around eventually. Or they won't. But I made my choice clear. Which was that I'm in love with you. The words were simple, direct. That you're not negotiable. That they can accept you or not, but either way, I'm choosing us. Tears burned her eyes. You really said that? Every word. He paused. I meant it. I love you, Petrina. Completely. I should have said it weeks ago. I love you too. The words felt like release, like truth, like coming home. God, I love you so much. They talked for another hour, planning next steps. He would inform HR on Monday, request the departmental transfers. They would go public slowly, carefully, but definitely. I wish I could see you tonight, he said. I want to be with you. Me too. She looked around her tiny apartment, at the rain starting to fall outside her window. But we've waited this long. We can wait a little longer. Can we? His voice held something she couldn't identify. Because I don't think I can. Not anymore. Tae-yoon. Stay on the phone with me. Please. Just talk to me. So she did. She talked about everything and nothing, filling the space between them with words until his breathing evened and she realized he'd fallen asleep, phone still pressed to his ear. She listened to him sleep for 20 minutes, the intimacy of it overwhelming. Then she ended the call gently, smiling despite her own exhaustion. The storm that night was worse than the previous one. Rain hammered against her windows with violent intensity. Thunder shook the building. Petrina tried to sleep but couldn't, her mind racing with thoughts of Tae-yoon, of his family's reaction, of the future they were trying to build. At 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep entirely. She stood at her window, watching Seoul's lights blur through rain-streaked glass, feeling the weight of everything changing. Her phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to call. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. Petrina? Are you okay? Yes. No. I don't know. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I just needed to hear your voice. I'm here. She heard rustling like he was sitting up in bed. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. Maybe for the first time in my life. She took a shaky breath. And that terrifies me. Because I keep waiting for it to fall apart. For reality to catch up and destroy this. It won't. How do you know? I don't. His honesty was one of the things she loved most. I can't promise this will be easy. But I can promise I'll fight for it. For us. She closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. The rain continued its assault on the window. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I'm wet because of you, she said quietly. What? The rain. It's pouring here. I'm standing at my window watching it, and all I can think is that I'm soaked through with missing you. With wanting you here. Her voice shook with emotion and desire and courage she didn't know she possessed. Please come home tonight. Silence stretched between them, charged and heavy. Petrina, if I come there. I know. Come anyway. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She opened her eyes, stared at her reflection in the rain-streaked glass. We've been so careful. So restrained. Following all the rules, doing everything right. But I'm tired of waiting. I need you here. Now. Tonight. I'm already getting dressed. 20 minutes later, she heard the knock. She opened the door to find him standing there, soaked despite the umbrella he'd abandoned somewhere, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes bright with the same need she felt. Hi, she said. Hi. He stepped inside, and she closed the door behind him, shutting out the storm and the world and everything except this moment. He reached for her. She came into his arms like coming home. Their kiss was different from the careful ones they'd shared before. This one held months of denied longing, of restrained desire, of everything they'd held back finally released. They broke apart, breathless. His hands framed her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones with reverent gentleness. I love you, he said. I need you to know that. Before anything else, that's what matters most. I know. She covered his hands with hers. I love you too. So much it scares me. Good scared or bad scared? The best scared. She smiled. The kind that means something real is happening. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. When they separated, she took his hand and led him further into her small apartment. The rain drummed against the windows. The city lights flickered through the storm. And for the first time, they had time, real time, private time, time that belonged only to them. What happened next unfolded with tenderness and intensity, fumbling and grace, laughter and sighs. They learned each other beyond words, communication becoming physical and profound. She discovered the scar on his shoulder from childhood, the way he smiled against her skin, how carefully he held her like she was something precious. He learned her curves and responses, her strength and vulnerability, the sounds she made when restraint finally broke completely. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her small bed, the storm still raging outside, but distant now irrelevant. His fingers traced patterns on her back. She pressed her ear to his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "We face everything together." His arms tightened around her. "Whatever comes, family drama, company politics, people's judgments, we face it together." "You make it sound simple." "It won't be simple." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But it will be worth it." She believed him. Against all logic, against every reasonable doubt, she believed. They fell asleep as dawn approached, the rain finally easing, the storm passing. When morning came, they would face the complicated reality of their situation. But in that moment, wrapped in each other and the quiet after the storm, everything felt possible. Because they had chosen each other. Not the easy choice, not the safe choice, but the true one. And sometimes, that was enough. See you in the next story, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.